When you are in touch with your sensuality and comfortable in your body, which self-pleasure provides, you will be amazed at how differently people respond to you, interact with you, the types of people you attract, how magnetic you can be.
Welcome to Sex and the Solo Girl. Join your host, her inner circle, and expert guests weekly for chats about dating, secure attachment, the solo lifestyle, doing relationships differently, and of course, sex. And here's your host, Janice Formicella.
Self-pleasure can be a portal to so many things: self-discovery, greater intimacy with others, and plus, it's pleasurable. It's one of my favorite leisurely activities. And today we're talking all about it. I am joined by intimacy and self-love coach Gina Catherine, who works one-on-one with people to discover all of the wonderful things that self-pleasure can provide. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
I was really glad to meet you, and this is a topic I've been wanting to do, and I think it's a good topic for a conversation rather than me coming on and talking about my self-pleasure routine. So yeah, I'm super stoked about this. Everybody get a pen and paper because I really think that this is going to be quite informative. Gina, how do you work with people involving self-pleasure? I want to hear about this. As you know, I'm really interested in sexology and sex coaching. It's definitely in my future. I'm curious. Tell us what this entails.
Yeah, sure. So I studied with Layla Martin, who runs the Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality, now called VIDA, and really awakened with that program, this sort of both fire and water, like this really steamy. I overuse, Janice, the word juicy.
Okay.
It's such a good word. Like this.
It's very descriptive.
Yeah,
go for it.
Juicy vibrancy, this, just like what you said, like a portal to our empowerment, to our self-love. And I found really that self-pleasure was the piece I was missing in my self-love practices. And it's really what was allowing me to really go deep into the feelings that I wanted to feel. And
for yourself.
Yeah, it really brought me there.
Oh, great.
So then, and so then what happens, right, is that you get so excited, so turned on by something that becomes a focus for you and you really want to shout it to the world. So where I was coaching around, I had a lot of coaching around grief and around transitions, and had talked a lot about dating on my podcast. And I really found that when people could tap into their own pleasure, their own turn on, and access that energy source, all of those things got easier. So with grief, we have numbness, and we can't delete the loss. We can only add something. So I found with a lot of inner work, there was the ability to refocus, and using self-pleasure for that was amazing. And then just to come back to what you said, it also feels amazing. This gift that you can give to yourself, improve your relationships as well. So we're not just talking about when you're solo, but I advocate self-pleasure for everything.
Yes, and we're going to get into that. I just started studying tantra, and it's definitely something that you practice solo and with a partner. And just as far as making everything else easier, everybody go back in my feed. A few weeks ago, I did an episode called Sex Magic, which was about sex magic with one of my best friends, Christine Lalonde. And we talked all about how masturbation can be used for manifestation. So go check that out. Oh, and you mentioned you have a podcast. What is the name of your podcast?
Yeah, I do have a podcast, and it's called The One Podcast with Gina Catherine.
Amazing, everybody. It's linked in the show notes. So it might seem obvious, but for the purposes of this episode, what are we talking about when we say self-pleasure? What do you consider it to be?
Sure. Thanks. That's a really great question.
Okay.
And there are a couple of different layers, right? So we could talk about sensuality first. So self-pleasure is really about giving yourself the time to observe what turns you on, what lights you up. And this pathway usually starts with, when do I feel safe? When do I feel the most turned on? Is it in nature? Is it when everything's quiet? Is it when everything's hot and like you're clubbing? Or and that these are very unique to everyone. There's a book called Vagina, and one of the things it talks about is our turn-on apparatus, all of our synapses, all of our biology is a snowflake in every single female-bodied person. The turn-on is different. And so self-pleasuring gives us a chance to really get to know, what is my very unique sexuality? What is my very unique turn-on? And here's the reason we don't do this, right, is because we're really told by society, women get off like this. Women sound like this. If you don't have a climax through penetration, there's something wrong with you. If you don't get turned on by the sight of an erect penis, something is wrong with you, right? And so that is all false. That is completely false narrative, right? And one that's brought to us not only by porn, but by media conditioning, books. I love Bridgerton, but narrative there is like, oh, they get together, they really love. He taps her on the clitoris, and she falls into this puddle. Really, I love it, and I understand that there are some limitations in movies, 1 hour movies, right? But there should be something under that says, after a lot of stimulation and after 45 minutes of play, this is where we got there, right? And so really,
I'm laughing about Bridgerton. I had to stop watching it when they took the Duke off for the second season because, oh man, I was watching it for him for sure. But I remember, I think it was either him or one of her girlfriends was telling her what sex actually is.
Yeah.
The look on her face. She was so horrified and confused. And I'm like, first of all, oh, please. And then it was just hilarious too, like how shocked she was.
Yeah. Well, so I've coached women who thought that, for example, the G-spot was a myth, some magical thing that men couldn't find, right, in heterosexual relationships. And she was my age. I'm 56. And I think that when we take sex ed, first of all, we're separated. And then we get...
If we had it at all, I wasn't going into sex ed as a little Mormon girl.
And then the focus is like, nowadays they roll consent in there. But the focus is really around how not to get an STI and how not to get pregnant. And they talk about consent. So with my kids, they did talk about consent in both separate, right? But nobody understands that female sexuality is not male sexuality light. And so what I mean by that is we all have the same parts, but arranged differently. However, the turn-on factors. So what I always say to all of my clients is everyone gets hard and everyone gets wet. We would never expect penetrative sex to happen if the male penis wasn't hard. I mean, there's soft entry and there's like play and things like this that you could do, but we expect penetration to happen before the vulva and the vagina get erect. Right?
That's not how I operate. But
so we're talking, pardon?
I said, that's not how I operate.
Right. No.
I know, a lot more.
But I think that you're very progressive and you're very knowledgeable and you have this like passionate curiosity about your sexuality and all of our sexuality. That's what I want people to have. And that's why I'm very smitten with you, Janice.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Is because you have this like, what else? You don't need yourself. And so the first thing about self-pleasure is,
Okay.
how can I get curious?
Okay, yes, I was going to ask you because some women, as you just mentioned, are either uninformed or maybe not inexperienced, though maybe, or maybe even just shut off to their own sexuality. So yes, how would you find what your turn on is in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And I would say that even women who consider themselves to be sexually empowered, right? I say who, I say when, they're really not tapped into their pleasure, which is, those are two different things, right? You can be in charge of your sex life, but not be the subject of your own pleasure. And so what I mean by that is, let's take it like from a dating perspective, right?
Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk about this subject versus object, which I know that you were hoping to bring up. Tell us all about this.
Yeah, so I would say that most of us are conditioned to be the object of desire, right? And this is where we get pushed into like, pick me girl. We get pushed into a lot of like, my sexuality is driven by how many people want me externally, right? Mm-hmm. And then we don't really take the time to slow down and think, who do I want to pick? Who floats my boat? Who am I turned on by? Because we're really like overwhelmed by the idea that, well, it's so hot when somebody wants us that much, right? And then we dismiss ourselves. We don't make ourselves the subject. So I always say, to make yourself the subject, you have to train your brain to know that that is a fun, safe thing. And so if you're going to give yourself the love languages, let's take a complaint, for example. A lot of my clients come to me and they say, in heteronormative relationships, they say, my partner, he doesn't take his time. He goes too fast. And so then I ask them, when you're in your self-pleasure practices, how much time do you give yourself? Do you slow way down? Do you give yourself a lot of sensual touch, or do you just try to rub one out? Because very often we're like, okay, we feel a little bit of something, and then we want to like feel that.
And a lot of the toys, especially the new technology in the last several years, like the womanizer, which I do use, but they're actually designed to give you quick orgasms. And I mean, they're powerful, but it doesn't take very long to get there with something like the womanizer, which for those of you who don't know, it has the suction rather than the vibration. And it's fun and everything, but I'm just saying, like, not only were we programmed before to not take our time, now we have technology like this that is amazing and pleasurable, but focuses on, what do they say, like giving you an orgasm within 3 minutes or something.
Right, which I'm not against, Janice. I also think that like these fun, like, I'm a fan, I'm a proponent of all different flavors, all different variations. I'll give you an example for myself. I had to get coaching. I was lucky enough to get coaching around when I self-pleasured, I did it in one way. Okay. Over and over and over again, from like when I first started self-pleasuring. Mm-hmm. So, and that was pretty early on, right? Before I was a sexual being, I realized, well, you're born a sexual being. Mm-hmm. But before I was sexually active, I self-pleasured. So I was very young. And I did it the same way forever, for decades and decades. And I wouldn't expect partnered sex to be the same position and the same thing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So in what way are you playing with your sexual self? In what way do you know your sexual self? And so self-pleasure is a really great way to get in there and get to know yourself. And so if we equated it to the phases of dating and you're new to self-pleasure, you wouldn't just go right in there and start, like maybe with the womanizer and
You would be shocked if that was your entryway.
Right. Maybe the first step to somebody who is not used to self-pleasure or doesn't feel comfortable with self-pleasure is just sitting with your sexuality, tuning in, maybe making a little diamond shape, right? So that your thumbs are connected around your belly button and your index fingers are maybe near the clitoral hood, right? And so you're just breathing into that.
Yeah.
I don't need anything from you. Here we are, gentle. I love you. Here's the thing that I realized so quickly. When I first started talking about self-pleasure, I was really turned on by that focus. And the mistake I made was I didn't drop back to meet people where they were. And so a lot of people aren't ready for give me the expansive surrendered orgasm.
Full body.
The energetic, the move.
Which is amazing, but you work up to it.
Yeah. And, there were all of these studies that showed that, done by men, that showed that there's one type of orgasm, right? And it's all clitoral orgasm. That is false. And so getting away from any of that narrative and giving yourself full permission to explore all of your erogenous zones. Under your eyes, your nipples, your armpits are a huge erogenous zone. Mm-hmm. The inner thighs, just giving yourself some time. So that dating your body, just getting your body warmed up, juiced up, accepting your sexuality exactly where it is, telling yourself with sensual touch, I love you exactly where you are. Even if you're numbed out, even if you're resistant to touch, even if you think you can't orgasm, wherever you are in your sexuality, Tantra shows us that the beginning is full acceptance.
And I'm going to go back to that as our wrap up. I'm really excited to talk more about Tantra for sure. Okay. And yes, I want to go on to dating pussy, but going back a little bit to what you said about just sitting with it and listening to your pussy. I have read Pussy by Mama Gina 3 times. And one of the practices she gives is to sit, and especially if you're possibly going to be making a decision or maybe feeling overwhelmed, is to put your hand on it and breathe into it and close your eyes and kind of see what she says to you.
Yeah. I actually I love Mama Gina. So Gina Thomas-Sauer, who wrote Pussy and runs the Women's Academy of Sexual Artistry.
I'll link to the book. I was changed by it, and it is revelatory. And if you are a little bit new to self-pleasure and the power of your pussy, go and read it. I'm not kidding. I think I read it twice in 1 year and then again the next year.
Yeah. Oh, definitely a handbook.
Yeah.
Just exactly what we were talking about before is switching your sexuality to be your own, just taking it back as being objectified to being the protagonist of your own story. So the piece that you're talking about, just asking, putting the hand on and asking, I find is a really gentle beginning. After I read her book, I did this 30-day practice where I asked Pussy, hey, what should we wear?
Okay.
Right. And what happened in the beginning is I did not really get a sense. I was still here in my head. I was still let me answer for pussy. But the cool part is when you put your hand on your vulva and you breathe into it and then you ask the question and be prepared. Women who have not asked their pussy, be prepared to hear nothing at the first, but keep at it. Yes. You are focusing a rather neglected piece of yourself, a voice that's inside of yourself that you've dismissed. You've taken the reins away. You've said your brain has taken the reins away from your turn on. And so I love that practice that you mentioned And you could use it like every day for 30 days. Like, I live in Portland, Oregon, and there are 2,500 coffee shops. I try to go. My goal is to hit everyone.
Okay, that's ambitious.
I'll walk in a neighborhood. And so here's the connection to that. I'll walk in a neighborhood and I'll be like, okay, pussy, take me to my cortado. And it's so much fun, right? It's so cute. It's such a cute practice and it's so much fun. And then in the beginning, I heard nothing. And then I heard a little ping, I felt, right? So I'm not really hearing. I felt a little light up, like a little timid matchlight. Mm-hmm. Now I hear like, I will talk to my friends and I'll get so jazzed about something. I literally feel like wet and turned on, right? So that's years of practice of connecting my intentions with pussy and just rolling her into the conversation.
I agree. This is so cool and powerful, and not enough women are doing it. Come on, everyone, get on board.
Yeah.
But first, Gina, what is cortado?
A cortado is one of my go-to drinks, and it is two shots of espresso. I live in coffee culture central. So 2 shots of espresso, I get oat milk, and then like 2 shots of, so it's 2 ounces of espresso, and then 2 ounces of milk. So it's like a macchiato.
Gotcha.
Okay. So it's a coffee drink that is super strong, one that I get all the time.
So also, how many coffee shops in are you?
Oh, I don't know the actual number. I wish that there was an app for this.
Okay. All right. We gotta get this. I want to see you checking them off.
Yeah. That's a good goal. Where have Pussy and I had these shots?
There must be a way. So something that you alluded to earlier, but I want to get clear on, is the concept of dating pussy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say either you're out of a long-term relationship that maybe was not as sexually satisfying or was, right? And you're now considering expanding your pleasure and you want to get into a self-pleasure practice. You wouldn't go straight to the womanizer, as you said, or you would start by getting to know her. You would start by getting to know pussy. And that can sometimes just mean conversation. It could mean, so it's a little bit what we've already tracked on, right? Let's say your love language is physical touch. How do you want to be touched by another? And so like giving yourself the type of touch that you want from others, getting to know the type of touch, getting to know your love languages through physical touch. One of my languages, for example. So I think everyone knows the 5 love languages.
Yeah. And I've done content on it before and will continue to do so because I think that it is so important for relationships.
Yeah. And I feel like we're more likely to accept these love languages from others when we give them to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so words of affirmation, right? I love you, outer labia, inner labia, right? Like, really loving,
hell yeah.
Yeah, understanding the uniqueness of your own body, worshiping, right? So one of the practices that I do that's a little bit more advanced is pussy worship.
Go for it.
You just open your legs wide in front of a full length mirror, and you start to stroke, you start to adore, you start to worship, right? So you're in this place where you're adoringly worshiping pussy. And you just like stroke the inner and outer labia. Maybe you use fingers or perhaps a crystal dildo. And I'm laughing because there's not a lot of podcasts that I'm able to like go full on.
Go for gold.
Which is why I love you. And so you're really like in worship mode, in adoration mode, in self-pleasure. And maybe you use some fingers and, you know, The G spot can be found very easily. I think most women are surprised how close to the entrance of the vaginal canal. But if you put 2 fingers up and you just start to stroke, you can, and you give yourself all like the expansive time. Put the sexy music on.
Yes, go on Spotify. There's some really fun playlists.
Yeah.
Sometimes when my partner comes over, I just search like sex on Spotify. And there's some, even there is just a tantric playlist. And it's all just like spicy, sexy instrumentals, but it's hot. So so as far as the erotic blueprints goes, I'm a sensual. And so a big thing for us is setting the scene. But if you're going to do a pussy worship, you should incorporate that for sure. Totally. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's a beautiful practice, right? And then also asking, I do a lot of dance, and which connects me to my sexuality. And I will ask myself before I put on a Spotify list, do I want drum beats? Do I want like primal drum beats? Do I want Stone Temple Pilots? I want Pendergrass, right? All of those things are.
This is so cool.
There is not one. So finding out what is my current mood right now in this present moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Can connect you to your, if you try to push yourself into like a slow sexual dance, when really you're feeling like drum beaty, you're fighting against your own mood.
And put your hand on your pussy and see what she says to you.
Exactly. Put your hand on your pussy. Also, asking consent. This is another thing I did. Asking consent from pussy before you insert anything into her. Really establishes, you think that doesn't matter because your brain is telling you, yeah, I want this, but am I a yes to this? So I use the jade egg, I use crystal dildos, but even tampons, even if you're getting an OBGYN exam, I started asking my doctor, can you ask me for consent? Or, like, let's ask for consent.
Hell yeah.
And I was 45 years at a doctor before I ever occurred to me that I need to ask pussy for consent.
And that's nerve-wracking. I have to say, I still have issues with getting exams, and that could be a way to lessen the stress of it. I like both of these practices, and I'm curious, and this is also a little more advanced. Are you familiar, or do you teach vulva mapping at all?
Yeah.
Okay. How can you get started with that? Because that's going to be a concept that people might not be aware of. I actually went to someone in Boulder for my birthday last year and had a vulva mapping.
Yeah.
But this is something that you can do on your own. So what is it? And perhaps what's a resource for people who might be like, what?
I would say, so I call it pleasure mapping.
Okay.
So you can call it, it's been called erotic mapping, pleasure mapping, vulva mapping. So for people who have vulvas, and let's just back up for a second, Janice, because one of the things that I find a lot of people do is you read this in articles, and I don't mean to be a stickler here, like a sex coach stickler, but people will say, can I touch your vagina? Or they'll say like, I can see your vagina through those leggings. I was like, I really doubt that you can see my vagina.
Also, ew.
Which is right. So we're talking about two different things. It's like calling your face your neck. So the neck is the vagina, is the canal, right? And the vulva is all the external. And there are so many pleasure neurons there. And we don't know what ours are because we don't take the time. And so vulva mapping, I'm so glad that you brought this up. Vulva mapping is, and for women who are still having a menstrual cycle, know that this will be different in different points of your cycle. And so you just really get to know, like, how sensitive is my clitoral head? How sensitive are my outer labia? How sensitive are my inner labia? What kinds of touch? There are some women who they cannot be touched on the clitoral head. Anywhere around, it is way too sensitive. And there are a lot of men out there who treat it like a DJ booth.
Like, yeah, rubbing it back and forth all quick. Oh, I'm having memories of that. And it's just like,
yes.
What do you think you're
and
doing?
With good intentions, right? They're going.
Okay, sure.
Right. They think they've been trained from porn and men. Porn is not real, and porn is made for typically the pleasure of men. I'm not saying that I don't watch porn or that I've never watched porn, but you need to watch it through the lens of this is not real.
Well, and if anybody is curious maybe about porn, there's been a lot of advancements as far as female-based, especially when it comes to audio porn. I used to have a subscription. I think it ran its course. But so a lot of women enjoy more storytelling in their porn and listen to some of the audio because it's all storytelling and it's hot.
So Dipsy, OMG, yes, there are a lot of resources out there that are really more natural and also that are queer-based for those who, even who are just queer curious, right? Back to the vulva mapping a little bit. It's just this beautiful way to know what your own pleasure is so that you can enjoy your self-pleasure time. And then also, if you do get into partnered sex, you could say like, I'll give you a little pro tip here. Like this quadrant, this is also very common, Janice, is the left area, like to the left of the clitoris, where the clitoris starts. And I think a lot of people who are listening to this already know that that the clitoris is an iceberg, right? You see the tip, the clitoral hood, and then there are these beautiful legs, these bulbs that go around the vagina, and getting those like so plumped up and juicy and erect, all of that is erectile tissue. There are actually more than 10,000 The old study was 8,000. So let's get up to date here. We used to hear all the time, even in Mama Gina's book, right, that there are 8,000 nerve endings in the clitoris, all of them designed for pleasure. That study was actually done with livestock. And
what the hell?
Which is valid, right? So the human study shows that, that this is how we do it.
I'll be the study subject. I'll go in and see.
Right?
I volunteer.
Yeah. And there are studies, Janice, about like people who squirt go in and they get hooked up and they show and test with dye. This is how we know it's not urine and how we know it's not female ejaculatory. So there are studies like that for people who are very sexually empowered and can easily get turned on. And a lot of those people have self-pleasure practices, right? This is what I always say is don't expect to show up in partnered sex. You would not expect to show up to a marathon start line without any training.
Yeah, but we do. Mm-hmm. And that's why so many women end up being unfulfilled and confused. I mean, how many times have we heard, women say that it's not all it was hyped up to be? Yes. And this is why. Mm-hmm.
But what I find is men are so tender-hearted, right? So the partners of my clients, I teach about 15% of my clients are men now. And they're so wanting. The intention is there, but there's this divide where we can't communicate. I believe that part of the communication gap in being able to tell your partner what feels good is that you don't know. You expect them to have some sort of magic strategy to bring you to climax or to bring you pleasure, when all of that pleasure is felt in our body.
And it's our responsibility. I'll just say now, and I think I'll return to it, is a man who is really confident in his masculinity will lean into this like you have never seen it before. One thing I want to say about vulva mapping that, not to go backtrack, but something that I didn't realize until I had my vulva mapping was different types of touch. And I bet you a lot of women listening wouldn't realize that if you have your lips just like kind of tugged a little, that can be so pleasurable. And I would have never really even thought to do that, to be honest. Before the practitioner just was like, can I try this? And I was like, oh my God, yes. How cool.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you brought that up, because that is key, right? So experimenting with the types of pleasure. So I'm able to say to my partner, I try to always say it in the positive, like I don't say like no poking, like can you flatten your hand, right? Like, because that's you know what I mean? Like, but like people will use maybe the end of their finger.
Okay.
So it's not poking so much, but it feels a little bit. So if I say like, can you use the palm of your hand, or putting a lot of firm pressure on the mons pubis.
Oh my God. I can't believe you're just saying this. I don't mean to interrupt, but I was just thinking that, and I was going to ask you what that bone is called, because that's something that I learned a while back. I used to do orgasmic meditation. Mm-hmm. So back then I found, and then also with the vulva mapping, how good that feels when like you have a lot of pressure on that bone.
Yes.
Like, wow.
Like where the pubic hair would grow.
Yeah.
Or does grow, right? Would grow. And this is another thing too, that I encourage all people with vulvas, go on the internet, look at all the different types of vulvas. You do not need any vulva surgery. You do not need it to be tucked. You do not need it. So this love of body, love of asymmetry, love of different colors, of like just this blossoming flower, loving your own vulva outside of comparison to these little pink prepubescent ones that we see.
Yeah. There's been lots of art around showing different shapes and sizes and types of vulvas. And really, I mean, go and look that up as well, because I mean, there is everything under the sun. And I really enjoy seeing those, first of all, because they're beautiful. And second, I think when I first started getting exposed to this, I was also, of course, involved with vagina monologues. I like some pussy. And that's when I first started getting exposed to this type of thing. And I just remember thinking, wow, I guess I might have thought mine was abnormal in this way, perhaps, but it's not.
It's not.
No. In fact, it's beautiful and perfect. Gina, before we take a quick commercial break, and then I've got some questions about Tantra and using this with a partner, where can people come and hang out with you online?
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that. I appreciate you greatly. So my website is ginacatherine.love.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, you'll probably put the links.
Oh, everything's in the show notes, and I'm going to put it on my socials too.
Yeah. My podcast is My Deepest Love. I'm going to have you on there.
Yes.
Janice, you will actually be my first and most honored guest.
Thank you. I'm excited.
My podcast is, it's called The One Podcast with Gina Catherine. It is on all of the platforms. I'm super proud to say that I won an award. I won a silver award a couple of years ago against Mel Robbins and Eva.
Okay, that's great.
For most inspirational podcast. The way I do the podcast is 15 minutes. And so it's so binge worthy. And so I do 15-minute solo episodes, but one time a month, I'm going to have a guest on to talk about things that are a little bit out of my wheelhouse, or that somebody else knows so much more about. And so that's really where my passion is. My passion is at the One Podcast. That is the one consistent love affair.
My podcast is like my child. I'm never quitting. And yes, I put a lot of love into it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that. And then I'm also on Instagram as well. So
yes.
Just Gina Catherine _ So thank you.
Everybody go give her some podcast love. I want my listeners to go and follow. I'm going to take a very quick commercial break. And then when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about self-pleasure in relationship / partnered sex. And then let's do a little Tantra.
Cool.
All right.
I'm ready.
A lot of you know that I am a breakup coach, but did you also know that I work one-on-one with singles to maximize their solo chapter of life? My program, Single and Secure, offers customized packages that include things like becoming securely attached, visualization and manifestation for the future, learning to embrace and love your single life, getting ready to date again, self-pleasure, preparing for your next relationship. Let's have a chat to talk about how Single and Secure can add fun and power to your life. Schedule your free intro call using the link at the top of my show notes. Welcome back, everyone. Gina, you've touched a lot on why this could be important for single vulva owners. Is there anything else you want to say about, how this can be a portal as a single person?
Yeah, sure. I guess the thing I want to say about self-pleasure, it's you offering yourself this time of deep connection. It's if you're struggling with self-love, if you're struggling with self-acceptance, with being able to surrender to everything in life, and you really want to have this connection, this flow of energy. You want to be connected to all of the energy that's possible for you, your creative juices. Self-pleasure is very possibly the thing that will get you there.
Yeah, kind of unlock the potential, of your intuition, your creativity, your sensuality. So you're getting down a self-pleasure practice. You're seeing all the potential. What does this have to do with partnered sex? How can you bring it into the bedroom with a partner?
The main gist is you can show up as your authentic self as deeply as you know your authentic self. And so having a self-pleasure practice allows you to tap into that authentic self.
Oh my God, my mind is blown because I've never heard it put like that. Ooh, I'm feeling turned on myself.
Yes, totally. And this is how you know it's working, right? Like this talk, this availability to it, and being able to use it as like what Mama Gina calls the GPS, the great sea in the sky.
Absolutely. Oh.
Yeah. And so what happens is you're more available to pleasure in partnered sex. And I just want to have one caveat is it's very difficult for me to talk about sex and sexuality without mentioning trauma. So a lot of people who have experienced a traumatic episode around sex and sexuality, that's stored in the body. And so self-pleasure allows that softly to come up. Sometimes you might find yourself crying, or you might find yourself suddenly contracted around that. This is because you're creating this sense of safety. You can't have maximum orgasm if you don't have safety, right? So if we're talking about orgasm, there are three components: the sensation, the pleasure, the expansive, when you start to expand, which is usually like a movement of body, a movement of energy, a movement of turn on. And then you have this surrender or this mind shift, right? Have you ever thought like, I couldn't tell you my name if you asked me, like in that moment of orgasm?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that puts you more in the moment than an orgasm. I mean, you really can't think about anything else.
And part of it is you need those three components. So a lot of women who feel like they can't orgasm with a partner, but they can orgasm in self-pleasure, it is because they have allowed themselves to relax fully. It's because they've allowed themselves to feel the sensations, and you're not worried about judgment, right? And so if you've had any trauma, just be aware that you need this sense of safety. You need the skills to tell your body, okay, I'm safe to explore here. And what better way to do that than in self-pleasure so that it doesn't come out later. And it can come out later in partnered sex. It will come out later with tears. I think probably a lot of us have just experienced crying with really good sex. And if your partner is very conscious, they will understand that this is a path to purification. This is a path to this trauma is not coming back. It's escaping because it's now so safe. It's so beautiful. You don't necessarily have to be in love with that partner to have that release. It's just this person is safe and it comes out.
Mm-hmm. And again, a man in his pure divine masculinity will provide that.
Yeah, right. But it starts with you.
Yes. Okay.
So you can't accept anything that you haven't realized yourself. You just don't see it. So you don't see anybody else's safety. You think everyone's unsafe if you feel unsafe. And so if you feel like, okay, I really got to know myself. I love my sexuality. This is my authentic turn on right now, here in this present moment, then pleasure with partners is more expansive, more beautiful, because there's no amount of getting pleasure externally that equals this crashing of pleasure of somebody who knows their pleasure and you who knows your own pleasure. Communicating it and being able to say no or yes or just like that. Just briefly talking about some of the holistic sex tools, right? So breath, when you have self-pleasure, and you can practice with different types of breathing. So like there's a fire breath, like, and that's like if you're maybe feeling a little dull, you're super tired, but you want to stoke this fire of turn on. Learning that there's a breath that you can do that with, like right into your solar plexus, right around the belly button, open mouth, just like almost like a thoroughbred, right? And then that might work, like experimenting with different types of breath. Breath is a great way to get out of your head.
Yeah.
So exhaling fully into the point of contact. And so that's a focus, which is another tool of Tantra, right? You have this touch point that you're really focusing on the touch point. Like this feels like this, and you're fully present. So you can use your breath to go into that. You can use movement. I do not know how many people keep their hips, their pelvic, like kind of still. Because they don't want to lose contact. They don't want to lose like in penetration or in when somebody's going down on you. They're trying to keep still.
You get in your head. If you're not moving, you're really in your head. I'm flopping all over the place when I'm getting moving your pelvic bone, getting used to that in self-pleasure so that you can move it during partnered sex. But no, wait, get out of your head. So move those muscles, move your arms, put your arms over your head, see what that feels like. Put your hand on your chest. I find for myself, like when I snake my spine, Janice can see me, but what I mean is like just this snake movement of your spine. I find when I tried that during partnered sex, that was the first time I ever had like an energetic full body orgasm. It was the first time I was ever able to expand that pleasure point from my vulva and my vagina and move it throughout my body to my breast, to my neck, to my head. It was like the floodgates open. So for me, like the snaking of the spine was something. And it's sexy too. I have to tell you guys that she looks hot.
But like experimenting with everything, right? And I just want to say something about Janice here really quickly is when you're tapped into your own turn on and you're really curious about pleasure as an energy, that's the point. So the self-pleasure practices allow that, and you recognize it in everybody. So in a partner, and you also do not objectify other people. You think, man, that dancer is ridiculously hot. And you take some of that energy back into yourself. You don't think like, I got to get with them.
Right, yeah. You don't go there. You recognize it.
Yeah, you're able to cycle that like hot turn on energy back into your own body because self-pleasure feels safe and fun. We're really talking about play here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So play, you mentioned the chakras and energetic orgasm, and we've also mentioned expansiveness. So we're going to talk briefly about Tantra, but everybody listening, we won't go into too much because we're going to come back and do an entire episode on it, and I can't wait. So chakras, expansiveness, these are all things that are used in Tantra. So what is Tantra and how does it relate to self-pleasure? And then we'll start wrapping up.
So just briefly to give a little teaser about Tantra and tantric practices. Tantra is really about feeling into your original essence, your wholeness. It is about not going to war with pieces of yourself, but integrating them, right? So I think as a society as a whole, we tend to think like, I don't like this part of me. Like, let's say if there's some prude piece of me, I'm like, I'm cutting that bitch out, right? Let's get rid of her. Like, I'm not a prude. I'm a sexually empowered woman. Da, da, da. There will always and forever be something holding you back unless you face that prude piece of yourself, which is probably not your original essence, right? And you bring her back in so you can have this sense of wholeness, but you just don't have to give that prude piece the reins or the keys to your sex life. A better example here is like you've probably heard about the inner child. So if you haven't addressed your inner child will probably end up running your sex life and also your money life. But doing inner child work is not about getting rid of that inner child. It's about holding that inner child. It's about bringing that inner child in and saying, hey, I got you. Tantra is about finding that piece of you that accepts you in your wholeness. It's really a lineage and a theology and an ethos. It's not a religion or, and it's
You mean
not,
Tantra?
Yeah, Tantra.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what Tantra does is it invites all pieces of ourselves so that we can fully thrive as our authentic self. And it's this really beautiful power of connection and exploring what is possible in our limitlessness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it's really beautiful because it's like about a wholeness and it's about acceptance so that we can expand greatly. And so, Tantra for me has been life-changing. There is a nourishment and a liberation that has really enabled me to show up as, like I used to walk onto a plane, and if I didn't have something special on or something, something eye-catching, nobody looked up. But since I've been using Tantra and since I've been allowing this full flow of energy all of the time, my energy is noticeable.
When you are in touch with your sensuality and comfortable in your body, which self-pleasure provides, you will be amazed at how differently people respond to you, interact with you, the types of people you attract, how magnetic you can be.
Yeah. It's a vibrancy that is ineffable. You can't really describe it, but it is a thing where you can play with it. You can play around with it, and it starts with playing around with your body, with self-pleasure.
Love it. And as far as learning Tantra goes, I have a manual that I mentioned to you. It's called The Art of Sexual Ecstasy, and it's a tantric manual. And it starts with various self-pleasure practices, and then it kind of goes like one self-pleasure practice, then one thing you can do with your partner. And it's really cool because it has self-pleasure practices for men and women. And it's a big part of learning the Tantra.
I love that. I love it, the practical examples are used. And so
it is. It has pictures and everything.
It's everything. So I could intellectually understand Tantra and it could not have changed my life. It was 10-minute practices every day or most days, right? Consistently. And it is things, Janice, you probably have noticed in your book that, okay, what's eye gazing going to get me? My partner and I have so much, baggage together that we're never going to figure this out, right? Man, the little practices that you use consistently are life-changing.
And that is a part of it. She says in the beginning of the book, if you actually want to commit to this, that you do have to schedule in time. And I'm like, hell yeah. And then one thing before we wrap, and I always hated eye gazing. I thought it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the safety factor. Yes. I haven't done it yet. My partner and I just started the book, so we haven't gotten to eye gazing yet. But I feel much more comfortable and at ease thinking of doing it. Yes, because, provides the safety and because I'm, I guess, more comfortable in my body. And also I think, realizing it might take practice. And if I don't want to do it, explore why. And yeah, that's part of the journey.
Yeah. And I think that for somebody who eye gazing is uncomfortable, practice in the mirror. Practice eye gazing in the mirror. Set a timer for 5 minutes or pick a 5-minute song and don't look away. Just eye gaze in the mirror. It comes back to like self, the inner work.
It all comes back to self-love. And again, if you feel like maybe you don't really know what that means, or you don't feel like you have a great relationship with yourself, if perhaps you don't think that you're your own best company, if you don't think that you're sexy, these are all things that you can develop, and it will make your life happier and your relationships better, your sex better, all of it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I love it.
Thank you, Gina. Like we said earlier, go hit her up on Instagram. If you want to dive in more to this, send her an email and check out her work.
Yeah, please do. It's so exciting and so worth it. Like it's the best gift you could give to yourself.
We will be back soon to just go into Tantra. I mean, maybe we could do a whole series because the book I have on the subject matter must be 400 pages or something. Thank you so much. This was a great episode. I keep on saying this, but I feel like every episode is just better than the next. And this feels like one of my favorites so far. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And Janice, I would say that the common denominator in these episodes is you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I am definitely on fire about this. I am thankful that I listened to my gut, my intuition, my GPS, my great pussy in the sky, when I decided to start a second podcast. Yeah. At first, I was going to change the name of Breakups, Broken Hearts, and Moving On and just kind of mix it up. And my gut was telling me, leave the Breakups podcast. People need it. Start a separate one that you can just go crazy with. And it was the right choice for sure. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. And I'm excited to have you on too.
Yes. Everybody go and follow The One podcast and keep your eyes out because I will be making an appearance soon.
Yay.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone who followed me to the new podcast. Thank you to everybody who's found me. Hope you're enjoying it. I guess leave me a review on Apple Podcasts if you have any positive feedback. All right. See everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to Sex and the Solo Girl with Janice Formicella, the podcast for those who want to add more flavor to their relationships with themselves and others. If you liked today's episode, make sure to head over to Instagram and let her know. See you next week.